Hello, everyone, and welcome to Health Science Highway in Radiology. I am Travis Williams. Center for Excellence in Education was founded in 1983 by Joanne DeGennaro and Admiral Rickover, who is the father of the nuclear navy and civilian uses of nuclear power, with a mission to nurture high school and university scholars to careers of excellence and leadership in STEM. We have 4 different unique programs for teachers and students, and that includes our Research Science Institute, our USA Bio-Olympiad, and our Teacher Enrichment Program, along with our STEM Lyceums. Today, we are excited to have 2 alum of our Research Science Institute, Dr. Yueh Z and Dr. Sarah Mia. They will be speaking to us today on radiology. Dr. Yueh is an associate professor of radiology and adjunct assistant professor in physics, astronomy, and biomedical engineering at the University of North Carolina. And Dr. Sarah Mia is the chief of radiology of the Children's Hospital in Colorado, section chief and vice chair of pediatric radiology with the University of Colorado Department of Radiology, and a professor of radiology and pediatrics with the University of Colorado School of Medicine. And so we will if you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can write them in the, you can use the chat function for that. And there will be a Q&A at the end of our session if you want to wait to that time to ask your questions, and we'll go from there. And again, I'm excited to introduce to you Dr. Lee and Dr. Mia.
Thank the CEE for this invite. It's pretty exciting for us to be able to talk about our fields. And as Sarah and I were just commenting, it's very funny because even though we haven't spoken in many, well, our paths, we've never discussed our paths specifically. They keep on wandering as if sort of weaving past each other in terms of both locations and sort of areas of interest and things like that. But you'll see how, and so that's why it's a lot of fun to be able to give this talk with her, because even though we have seemingly very similar paths on paper, day to day, what we do is also slightly different. So why the field of radiology? I think quite bluntly, number one is I like it because of the physics and the cool physics that's involved, and the fact that bottom line is we have X-ray vision. Try telling your son that, and the kids around you and your students that unfortunately or fortunately, radiologists can see through things, and that's what we do. One thing that it takes a little while to explain, and to physics students, be it at the college level or especially younger, is that we do work with antimatter. Positron emission tomography, a positron is a form of antimatter, and we use it daily. Thankfully, we don't destroy the universe daily, but it does. We do use it every single day, and it's sort of cool. We, of course, hope to help people and save lives. That's actually fundamentally why I'm sure we went into the field of medicine. And what we think is really cool is us either as radiologists or interventional radiologists, we can reach anywhere in the body with a tiny little incision, especially the places that surgeons can't safely reach. And from a STEM perspective, we use biology, anatomy, and physics every single day.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from our side, what we are so fortunate to get to do is truly kind of what some of these pictures are showing you here. You know, we get to use technology to look inside the human body, which is really amazing. And from a conceptual standpoint is something that I have just fallen in love with since day one when I learned about radiology, is being able to really look inside both the brain, the spine, but also inside all aspects of the human body to look at what could be going on wrong and help diagnose and then follow treatment. You know, I think a lot of families have interacted with radiology, and, you know, even from diagnosing broken bones to doing ultrasounds, even for normal pregnancies, most families have interacted with radiology. And I think it's an aspect that, especially for the middle school and high school teachers, as you're teaching anatomy and teaching about how the human body works, I think it's a very natural aspect to partner with radiologists in particular, but physicians as a whole, in helping illustrate how the human body works and the things we know and the things we don't know, but teaching normal and also functional anatomy.
So radiologists are responsible for the interpretation of images, but there's not just radiologists in this field. And as I work with technologists in the entire spectrum of people every single day, I'm constantly reminded that it does take a village for us just in a functional department of radiology. And so we wanted to sort of highlight that the end goal is not necessarily always the radiologists, but the other people who work in it. So medical physicists and engineers are the ones who build and fix and invent the machines that acquire the X-rays, the ultrasound, computed tomography, PET scans, and MRI scans. The radiology technologists are the ones who acquire the images and use these devices. I have technologists and sonographers at my institution that I consider just as well advanced and trained as the MDs that work with them constantly, and often are our go-to people in the middle of the night when we don't know what's going on. We're seeking out their help. The advanced practice providers, nurse practitioners, and physician assistants, they assist radiologists and physicians in performing the procedures and interpretations of images and work closely also. And then, of course, the radiologists who typically have a medical degree or degree of osteopathy that interpret the images and or perform the procedures utilizing these machines.
And I love the concept of really we're a team. And as anyone who's used radiology knows, it starts from when you schedule your radiology exam to when you get there and you're brought back either by a nurse or a technologist to go get the study. And a real emphasis is that not everyone is going to necessarily think they want to be a physician. And I think that understanding that radiology is an amazing field, that there's many different ways to work in this field, from the physics side, the engineering side, from a technologist side of working a lot with the patients and the families to get the perfect images. And there are the specific technology schools. You can actually, some people go to those technology schools after they get an undergraduate degree, while others may go directly if they kind of know that that's something that they're going to be interested in. I think that in general, to be on a leadership track for technologists, we do recommend that they go to do an undergraduate program and get a bachelor's degree. And that can be in anything, and then go on to technology school, either in radiation or in radiology technology or in ultrasound as kind of a slightly different training program. But those allow the technologists to advance in leadership. So I think it's an important aspect that no matter what someone wants to do in radiology, I think going into getting an undergraduate degree is still a great first step. There are going to be some folks who know that they don't want to be physicians and necessarily dedicate the 4 years of undergraduate, the 4 years of medical school, and then typically we usually have an internship and then 4 years of radiology residency and another year, usually a fellowship. So that's a lot of training to become a radiologist. And certainly, we think it's really a fantastic job and career. It won't be for everyone, but there are opportunities. And just like was being mentioned, advanced practice providers and our technologists are truly our right hand in getting the images and helping the practice of radiology. So there are some careers in radiology that also don't necessarily need the extra 10 years of training that becoming a physician and a radiologist necessitates.
I guess, in fact, to build on what Sarah had actually just said, some of my closest colleagues and collaborators in the field of radiology are actually technologists. We're always, we just lost a very spectacular MR technologist. And so we're still grieving from that process because he decided to go down the street. But my pathway is somewhat messy. I decided to spare you all with the very long training process, but I actually grew up in the Midwest in Kansas City, a suburb of Kansas City, and grew up in Kansas. From there, I bounced to MIT for my undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering. From MIT, I went to UC San Diego for my master's degree in bioengineering, and then finally came to UNC-Chapel Hill, where I did medical school, did my PhD in biomedical engineering, residency and fellowship, internship, residency and fellowship, all here at UNC-Chapel Hill. My area of research, well, anyways, that was my training process, and then I selected neuroradiology as my fellowship. I've been fortunate to sort of be able to see both sides of the training perspective from both the medical side and the biomedical engineering side of things in terms, and that's what leads me to sort of the research areas that I'm interested in, but we'll talk about that in just a minute.
And then we kind of mentioned that our paths have been very similar. I grew up in Virginia, near Washington, D.C. in Springfield. And then we met at RSI when we were in between our junior year and senior year in high school. And then both of us went to MIT for undergrad. I then basically bounced all around for my training and moved to different cities every time I could. So I went to Duke for medical school. I did my internship at University of Massachusetts Medical Center. I did my residency in radiology at New York Presbyterian Hospital at the Cornell campus. And then I did my fellowship at Boston Children's Hospital in pediatric radiology. And so I also specialize in pediatric neuroradiology. So we do sometimes get to see each other either at professional meetings in neuroradiology or in kind of larger professional meetings in radiology as well. And so as was mentioned, I've actually practiced in New York, Atlanta, and now in Denver, Colorado. So, there's a lot of opportunity to either stay in one place for a lot of your pathway, or you can move around. And it does give people the options to kind of choose their location in every different part of their training.
My research, I guess, quite the easiest way to describe it is really that it's centered on bringing the physics or looking at medical imaging from the physics perspective. I'm fortunate along my pathway to have touched on every single imaging modality. It's not necessarily the smartest way to go, and I would highly not recommend it for others, but in my own interest in medical imaging, which actually started when I started as a junior in high school at RSI, sort of paved that path. I never knew exactly which path I was going to take. I just knew that I was interested in medical imaging. And actually, initially, I thought I was going to stick on purely the research side of things. But as I progressed, and actually when I was at MIT, I was fortunate to work with graduate students who did the HST program. And specifically, that means they took 2 years of medical school. And all of a sudden, it opened up my eyes as a mechanical engineer to the world of biomedical engineering. But biomedical engineers who had a significant depth in terms of medical training, meaning they actually finished half of medical school before they finished their PhD. And from that, my interest in sort of the medicine side of things, the practice of radiology grew, and that's sort of what set me on my way. During, of course, COVID, I had sort of stayed out of, our labs were partially shut down. A lot of our work was obviously remote. And of course, we had the ventilator emergency that started to creep up. And I had not meant to jump into it, but unfortunately, because of our environment and my collaborators being many of the pulmonologists who are working hard in the ICUs constantly, I couldn't ignore this issue. And again, because of my training, because of sort of where my research sat, it just made sense for the project to culminate, for us to be working on this and sort of produce a low-cost ventilator locally, or at least the designs for it to potentially use. It's one of those projects that much like one might say weapons or whatever, that you hope to never use it. This is a product that we were thankful we never actually had to put it in use into a patient, but it was something that was at the ready had we crossed that line. My day-to-day research is actually focused on X-ray sources. Just a little bit of history. We can't go through this type of thing without learning a little bit of history and hopefully a little science. But William Coolidge was at the GE Research Laboratory as a young scientist in 1911. He invented essentially the modern X-ray source. He first used ductile tungsten filaments to figure out the light bulb, which is now, as you know, what we're trying to phase out, but has been around essentially for 100 years. And he then proceeded to take that ductile tungsten filament and apply it to the generation of electrons for X-ray tubes also. So that's what he invented in 1913. What's interesting, of course, is the modern X-ray tube, this is something from Merriam-Webster in 2006, is essentially the same and has the same parts. And so what happened for me in terms of how I describe research and my interest in medical imaging to other people is that I was fortunate here at UNC to be present when a new carbon nanotube-based X-ray source was invented. And the idea here is instead of heating the tungsten filament like we do for the old school light bulbs, we actually use the carbon nanotubes to generate electrons. So this is just like our normal light, or the incandescent light bulbs, where we heat up the tungsten filament to over 1,000 degrees Celsius. We apply a bias voltage of 50 to 100,000 volts, and the electrons that we generate in this little cloud here come flying off and produce X-rays. This is relatively inefficient, and because it's just like the old school light bulbs, it's actually very difficult to control. Our carbon nanotube-based cathodes, instead, they're these tiny little carbon nanotubes that are made on a substrate. We have a little gate. We apply a voltage to that gate, a couple thousand volts. Then we apply the acceleration voltage, and now we can generate X-rays, even pulsed X-rays very easily. Just like when you turn off an incandescent light bulb and there's an afterglow, it's actually very difficult to turn on and off a conventional X-ray source. Well, with ours, not only do the electrons come out pre-focused and you don't have to spend your energy focusing them, the X-rays that they produced are already designed to be partially focused and then also pulsed, so it allows us exquisite control. Long story short, I was a graduate student working on MR physics when these were invented, it turns out at UNC, and I happened to be the only one left on campus who had experience building X-ray devices. And fast forward, our group with my collaborators in the physics and astronomy department, our first device is a stationary digital breast tomosynthesis scanner that utilizes the fact that we can put lots of X-ray sources close together. Our second one is a chest tomosynthesis device. The idea is that we can do 3D imaging at the bedside instead of having to roll patients to other parts of the department or other parts of the hospital to radiology. We have what I call the easy bake oven, the orthotomosynthesis unit for orthopedic injury. This is for wrist imaging. And then our FDA approved product is the intraoral device that helps dentists see cavities better when you have your dental exam. So I've been very fortunate to be able to apply technology, my interest in technology engineering, to my field of practice, radiology, and actually build devices that are slowly making their way through the commercialization process and things like that. The actual commercialization process, I rely on other people and I work with other people, but the invention of these sources, the invention of these devices and building them are things that we do every day. We've made them relatively pretty here, but if you look in our labs day to day, it's a mess of wires and it's almost like a mad scientist shop, if you will. Here's what we're currently working on is a stationary head CT imaging some objects. This is a head phantom. It's not a patient yet. That's a comb because one of my students needed to image something that gave us a sense of the resolution. And of course, the ubiquitous fruit that all medical physicists love to image just to demonstrate that they can image something.
Thank you. And I think one of the things that we would both emphasize is really the importance of creativity and curiosity no matter what field in STEM you go into or your students go into, I think the A and why they incorporated STEAM, the A into STEM to STEAM, is a really important aspect that I have kind of gotten back into. And I think that ultimately curiosity and creativity help advance science. For me, my pathway is now really more in leadership, and my research previously was in brain development and also similarly in MR sequence development, trying to image the body better in children. As we know, a lot of times children can't stay still for as long. So finding ways of either decreasing how long it takes to get imaging or helping improve the images when we know we have wiggly children. So now I've kind of moved on and in the various roles that I have in our radiology societies, I really work in the space of education and professional development for other radiologists. For me and my pathway, I've just found such great value in sharing education and sharing the knowledge that I've accrued over the 30 years and sharing that. And so I'm just kind of highlighting a couple of books that have come out, and I have a book in the teaching files, and I'm just noticing right now that I put a friend of mine's book instead of my book in the teaching files. We have a pediatrics version that is similar. And then a book that just recently got published on problem solving, and which is really another aspect, which is not just kind of teaching, it's really trying to help people solve problems. And then I put one of my Twitter posts that recently went up. I've been working really in the space of developing leaders and making sure that we're teaching empathy and compassion to medical students and our trainees. And one of the things I've come back into really enjoying is the space of art. And I had been very interested and almost considered a career in contemporary art and architecture. And I think in my journey, I've kind of come back to that initial love. And I just completed an art museum-based education fellowship at the Harvard Macy Institute. And I'm really excited about sharing those experiences and how we can teach resilience and compassion and empathy by using art to help guide conversations, also about areas like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and health humanities and health equity. So just to show that the path still revolves around science, but it does also allow that space for curiosity, creativity, and a love of art and emotional intelligence.
So we outlined some simple ways, and I've got a couple slides here to talk about how can you support your students towards a pathway in radiology or the affiliated fields. Of course, the fact that all of you are here right now, spending the time with us means that you already support STEM. And so obviously we applaud you for that and we appreciate you for that. And the whole goal here is to find other opportunities to connect. One simple way that I know pediatric radiologists love to do is show X-ray images of everyday objects. Dr. Lynn Fordham, our chief, and who's also is a pediatric radiologist, I knew she was the one I needed to go to borrow her slides to show things at my son's school when he was young. But the idea is that can get more complex, and you can understand different aspects of physics and sort of how things work through that process, not just the teddy bear, but maybe more complex machines as they work. Another opportunity for them is to volunteer at various departments or in at various departments, just even helping out. Many of the either in terms of waiting rooms or helping out patients. So each hospital, obviously there's an age limitation, but there's plenty of opportunities that might be available to your students. Research is a broad area. of which there may be opportunities. We do use certain aspects of things do use ionizing radiation, but there's definitely ways to approach medical imaging, such as ultrasound. Back in the old days, when I first did my ultrasound research, it was $100,000, $200,000 machine just to get it in the door was impossible. Now you can get iPad, iPhone-based ultrasound machines, and so there's lots of opportunity that wasn't available to us when we started many years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just similarly, I recently had sent one of my friends who's a baseball mom with me, and she happens to be a middle school and high school science teacher. And she had mentioned that they were learning about the heart and talking about heart surgery. And one of her students had asked a question about how do they get the body to heal. And so I sent her an X-ray of a patient that had heart surgery, and showed the wires that are used to bring the sternum back together after heart surgery. And so I think, again, partnering with radiologists is a great way to help teach anatomy and function of the body. And we have tons of images that we are so excited to share. And so we can always connect you with your local radiologist or pediatric radiologist. We have colleagues all across the country who are really interested in helping get middle and high school students excited about the human body, about medicine, and certainly about radiology.
My son is 13, and I think he has a mixed experience with STEM teachers, and so this is drawing on a little bit of his experience and sort of seeing what he's going through sort of day to day. These are my opinions, so I'll apologize because Sarah hasn't had a chance to see this particular slide. But I strongly feel that we shouldn't teach down to students. I really do think we should hold them to a high scientific standard, and not that we're trying to teach them, high energy physics when they're just learning physics, but the whole point is we don't want to dumb it down, because all of a sudden they, in my opinion, they don't feel that maybe, for your mature STEM students, they feel like they're being talked down to quite a bit, and it just turns them off to this idea. And a lot of it, I think, is to try to spark them and of course raise them to that higher standard, to challenge them, to show them that there is more for them to learn and understand. There's always an opportunity to bring in topic experts from the parents community to assist in whatever aspect of STEM if you can. Because ironically, it was actually, I purchased an Arduino kit for my son to play with, and then I watched him do the first project on my desk, and I suddenly realized that we could replace hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment with that $25 microcontroller, and that's what actually we've done. And so the opportunity to connect with makerspaces who offer 3D printing, the Arduino programming, Raspberry Pi, et cetera, I think is a spectacular way and relatively low-cost way to introduce students to programming. These are opportunities and capabilities that we didn't have in engineering years ago, and the numbers and types of devices you can create with this equipment is now pretty impressive. It actually runs my most complex machine right now. Of course, outreach from universities, zoos, et cetera, there's always opportunities. I think it's really endless, and it's really up to your own creativity to find them. And of course, local events and happenings. April was Science Month in the state of North Carolina, so we have a full month of STEM events every weekend. If you can't find something that a STEM student is interested in, then given how many events were going on in the state of North Carolina, then I think it'd be a little crazy. We do hope that teachers are truly the sparks or help initiate the sparks. My son lately has been disappointed because, having done reasonably well in local science things, his science teacher ignored it. I wish I was not. I wish I was wrong, but unfortunately, she's just not interested. It wasn't her thing, and so she's ignored it. And I see science and engineering education as really seeking the experiences, knowledge, and tools to really help us understand and improve the world around us. And I think we build on that. And I think all of education is that way, but especially for the stuff, and at least in my path, that even my hobby as a photography in college helps inform me as a radiologist in understanding medical imaging. I by no means claim to be an artist, a real artist, but I do know something technical about photography, and that's really guided and assisted my imaging research along the way.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, it's definitely, I think both of us consider ourselves teachers and educators, and it's definitely for us, we have a more consistent basis, because usually we're educating people who are in medical school or already training to be radiologists. And so we would definitely recognize how challenging it can be in middle school and high school when you have a total range of people and their interest in science or disinterest in science. And I think it's a real challenge to really be addressing all of the different groups, and certainly trying to help, all of the students find something that they're interested in, and then allowing them the space to grow is certainly, something that we would definitely encourage. And as was mentioned, partnering with groups, and also, putting a little bit of the onus on the kids as they find something that they're really loving and enjoying. And then, I love the aspect of flipped classroom. There's so many things that I feel like the next generation teaches me about everything. And so allowing them to, be a subject expert and then flip the classroom, have them teach the rest of the group and see how challenging it sometimes is to engage and grow and have these discussions. But then it really pushes them, and it also gives them the opportunity to become the expert in something. And I agree. I think Atlanta just had, I think last month was also similar. I don't know if it's like a science month all across, but they had similarly an Atlanta Science Expo. And there were, for 2 weeks, basically, there were opportunities. And so highlighting things that are going on in your local areas, I think is always really amazing to help let the kids choose the things that they might be interested in, and then share their experiences with their classmates and with you. And so just saying thank you for all you do as educators. Both of us have kids in middle school and about to start high school. So we recognize how challenging it can be. And but these are our potentially future doctors that are going to take care of us when we get older. So thank you for all that you're doing to help stimulate their interest. And certainly, we have the Research Science Institute and the Center for Excellence in Education to thank for our career paths and starting us off. And so we just want to kind of share that. And certainly please reach out to us if you want more information or if you want to be connected to your nearby radiologist. Between us, I think we do know a lot of people in the radiology community, and we can definitely connect you with people that would be helpful. And then similarly, we are Zoomable, so we can always Zoom into classrooms too. So there are tons of different options. But please know that we appreciate you. Thank you, and please be in touch if you'd like more information. And we're always happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, you guys. Again, if you have any questions, please post them in the chat. I know that there were a few earlier, but again, I just want to say thank you guys. As a former teacher myself, this was really good and very helpful, and it's so interdisciplinary that I didn't really know that radiology kind of touched on so many different aspects of science, whether it's physics, chemistry, engineering, and technology. It really kind of touches all of them, which is really awesome. So again, I appreciate and thank you guys so much for that. So I did have one question. And you may have mentioned it before, and I'll start with you, Dr. Mia. Again, kind of what initially caught your interest in radiology?
Oh, thanks, Travis. I will tell you that when I finished MIT, my undergrad degree was in biology, but I had taken a lot of visual arts classes. And I took a year and was working at MIT, but was also working as an artist assistant and sculpting and trying to figure out if I wanted to be an artist. And my mom actually had reminded me that when I was younger, I had wanted to be a doctor. And she encouraged me to apply to medical school, and I did. I got into Duke and went down there, and my second day of medical school was introduced to a radiologist. So my mentor, or my teacher that I was closely partnered with on the second day of medical school, was a radiologist. He brought us into the area where we look at x-rays. We call it the reading room. And he showed us what he did all day, which was look at pictures and tell what's wrong with people by looking inside their bodies. And I just thought that was the most incredible thing, using science to non-invasively look inside the body. And now I help teach at the medical school, because I think it's a really important aspect for medical students even to know is you may get to see inside the human body either in surgery or in anatomy lab, but for the rest of your medical life you will see people's body parts through radiology. And I fell in love with it. It was a combination for me of visual arts, conceptual art, and also medical science. And I just loved that combination. And so basically from day 2 of medical school, I thought I was going to be a radiologist, and I did fall in love with other aspects of medicine, but ultimately I was destined to be a radiologist.
Awesome. And same question to you, Dr. Lee. What kind of sparked that interest for you in radiology?
Mine was actually because of RSI. Maite may or may not remember, but I originally thought I was going to do neural networks. And so that's what I filled in as what I was interested in when I started in San Diego. And unfortunately, my roommate was also interested in, and there was only one spot available. And so they said, we've got a spot at the medical center. Would you mind? It's engineering, it's medical imaging. I realize that's not your first choice, but we thought it would be interesting. And long story short, I got dumped into that lab not knowing what to expect. And the bug really bit hard. I had experienced something unfortunate happen in the lab on the first day, which hit me personally and surprised me. But bottom line is I saw the sort of both power and weaknesses of the field that first day in terms of that experience. And it was actually related to what Sarah said earlier, which was the baby was moving too much. And so unfortunately they couldn't get decent images, and sort of things happened from there. But bottom line is, therefore, I sort of saw the medical imaging physics world as my path. In contrast to the art side of things, I really saw the physics. I grew to love the physics. I grew to love the limitations of the physics and how it drives our ability to do more, actually. So it's a weird thing, but I always see these where the weaknesses of the physics are where the opportunities are. And so many of the research problems I like to touch are what I call the holy grail problems. They're so silly and ridiculously not logical that that's exactly why they're interesting to me. And so one of the best examples, which is too deep into the research side of things, is we can do some sub-second ventilation imaging with MRI, which is crazy. But through collaborations and people that I happen to be work with, very good collaborators, thankfully, we've got some beautiful images lately that allow it, which is absolutely crazy from a physics perspective, but it turns out we can do it, and doing it reasonably well. So those are the problems I like to face, and it really sparked from me being at that summer camp in a situation that nobody could have ever planned. And I've sort of meandered my life, a very long training path to get through there and to where I'm at now.
That is amazing. I like how you said where the weaknesses are is where the opportunities are. That is something that, we should all definitely aspire to use in our, work or daily lives, and understanding how to make progress, right? And yeah, that is awesome. I did have another question regarding, like, I guess the entry point for radiology. Is it medical imaging? Is that kind of a entry
No.
point?
So medical imaging as a term is very broad, of course. You can do medical imaging physics, and as Sarah mentioned, there's many technologist schools. I think UNC has one, so I know the leaders of that program, where you can quickly, within a 2-year program, be able to be a part of the radiology department, image patients. I rely on these technologists day in and day out to acquire our MRI, CT, X-ray, ultrasound images. So that is the sort of shortest pathway. But then every sort of opportunity past that, it's I think for most, it's the exposure to the field in terms of being able to utilize this sort of equipment every single day, and help with the patient care process at whatever level that we mentioned, are the opportunities. So I think it really is dependent on the person and which path they're interested. The classic example by one of our former chest radiologists is, people would always ask him, "Oh, do you have to know something about computers?" And I would crack up every single time, because he was the last person who knew anything about computers and relied on, typically our other trainees to fix his computer all the time. He'd call up a resident and say, "Hey, can you fix my computer for me?" So clearly he was not an expert on fixing computers, but he was one of our most successful thoracic radiologists or chest radiologists. So you don't have to have a technical background. I personally am in a far extreme in that, so I don't suggest my path, especially for those who aren't necessarily interested in that side of the technology.
Okay.
I think it's a really good point. I used to tell folks, and I don't know if this magazine really still exists, but do you guys remember the Highlights magazine? And the Highlights had this, what's different about these two pictures? And I think that's one of the things that I always love to do, is that in that Highlights magazine, is to figure out what was different between the pictures. And it's interesting. I know Yueh is doing a lot also in artificial intelligence, which is something that our field it's going to be the future of our field too, is pattern recognition and machine learning. But one of the things that I fell in love with is I'm a visual person. I love looking at images, and it was very easy for me to figure out what was wrong with the image that I was looking at. And then it was critical thinking. So now I've just decided what was wrong with this picture, what's not normal about it. Now, what does that mean? And what's the diagnosis? And so that it was kind of both of those aspects of detecting what's wrong on the picture and then figuring out what it means, and letting the physician who ordered the examination know what I thought was wrong with the patient, so they can get appropriately treated. As we come into this world of artificial intelligence, it's a huge opportunity to either be part of the development of artificial intelligence. I think both of us have actually published in this sphere a bit, but it's basically now we can use computers to help us figure out what is wrong with this picture, right? So you can train a computer to actually detect, hey, this computer's looked at 1 million x-rays before, and now I give it this x-ray, it can tell me this area here doesn't look like most of the other x-rays it's seen before. Now, there's the detection part, and then there comes the critical thinking part, which is the next stage, which is, okay, now the computer has circled the area. Now we need to train it to figure out, what does this mean? Now, do I think that, this is going to put all radiologists out of a job? I actually don't. I actually think it's going to allow radiologists to change a little bit of their practice. I think it'll help us be more accurate. And hopefully have computer programs that if I don't see the problem, the program might say, hey, did you look at this area? And I'll say, oh yes, or I agree, or you know what, I've been doing this for 30 years. I think that's actually normal. But it's going to help us also interface with our patients more, because right now a lot of our job is in, you'll hear a lot of people have never met their radiologist, and it might allow us to come out and talk to the families and talk to the patients. Hey, just wanted to let you know that CT scan looked totally normal and everything looks good, and your doctor's going to follow up with you. So the field of radiology is changing, and I think it's really exciting to be a part of that change and a part of the evolution of it. And the way we practice medicine as a whole is going to be changing also. So this is how we practice today. I think we both are super fascinated at the possibilities that are occurring because of the technology that is being developed, and that we're kind of also helping try and test and develop.
That is awesome. So we did have a question from one of the participants. They would like to know, they say, my daughter is interested in volunteering. How do we find local volunteering opportunities? I
think to begin with, typically at the hospital, almost all hospital departments have the opportunity, have a volunteer department, and they can sort of walk you through what's available for students, depending on the age level. My son, for example, wanted to play one of his instruments in the hospital, and obviously during COVID, that's impossible. But as he turns 14, I think that becomes an opportunity. So obviously there's different ways and different opportunities there. But I think the hospital volunteering department is a great first step. Then as the students interact with different people, then it might open up different doors and opportunities. From the research side of things, we have high school students inquiring about volunteering with our research side of things all the time. I don't have I actually have a couple of projects that were undergraduates who were still trying to figure out what they were interested in, who did projects with me. One is a young lady who's now a radiation physicist. She did her physics degree, then followed by her medical physics degree at Duke, and now she has worked all over the US, but now is back local as a radiation physicist, and that's where she started. She helped build one of my original machines, and I crack up because she was an undergraduate sophomore, and a physicist who was still trying to feel out whether or not she was going to go even towards the field of engineering when she did that. So there's lots of opportunities to get involved at very different levels, depending on the age and the local situation.
Yeah, I think that's definitely can be sometimes a challenge, and that's it's a great point that most hospitals, and especially the children's hospitals too, they do want to encourage volunteers. The amount of contact, or whether it's research or what type of volunteerism it can be, it may be limited depending on the child's age. Usually there are kind of shadowing opportunities, but in general, there's always volunteer opportunities. They just might be age specific and age appropriate. But also I think bringing kind of the flipped experience is bringing doctors or other career folks, whether it's in any aspect of medicine, bringing them to the schools so that they can have a bigger impact and allow a full classroom of kids to have exposure and into that field, and kind of similar to what we've done, but engaging more people may be helpful as well.
I don't think we have any more questions at this time. Did you guys have anything else that you would like to share?
For me, it wasn't the highlights, it was puzzles. For whatever reason, since being very young, I could at least outwit anybody in the family with puzzles. My father actually, even during high school and college, depended on me to come home to finish his puzzles that he'd start and get nowhere. So for me, it was always puzzles. It's obviously another visual task. We had one faculty member who was bird watching. I remember she could spot a lung cancer or a lung nodule like nobody's business. And I knew there was something in her background that let her, that trained her eyes to be very sensitive that way. And it was bird watching. And truly, that's what she did with her father when she was young.
We'd like to thank you all for joining us here at CEE. And again, thank you for joining us. And we will send a notice when the recording of this event today is available. It will be available on YouTube and other social media sites. It is, this event presentation has been also recorded, and there are links in our chat for you to go and visit our different programs if you're interested in them. And again, Dr. Lee, Dr. Mia, we thank you all so much for your presentation today.
Thank you for having us.
All right.
Yes, thank you.